Okay, picture this. Imagine a city of 11 million people, a megacity that literally just endured a civilization-altering pandemic, surviving unprecedented lockdowns and intense collective trauma. Now, imagine telling those exact same survivors that a catastrophic wall of water is headed right for them. In this explainer, we are diving deep into the terrifying vulnerability of a major urban center caught right in the crosshairs of a failing megastructure.
First, we really need to wrap our heads around the sheer scale here. We aren't just talking about some tiny dot on a map. We are talking about 11 million individual lives. Wuhan is a massive, pulsing economic powerhouse with the GDP north of $250 billion. It's home to vital auto manufacturing like the Dongfeng Motor Group, massive steel production, cutting-edge biotech, and get this, over 80 universities hosting 1 million students. All of this human and economic vitality is sitting directly in the path of danger.
Now, Wuhan sits 700 kilometers downstream from the Three Gorges Dam. And, at first glance, you might think, well, 700 kilometers, that's huge. That's a massive buffer of safety. But in the context of a total dam failure, that distance isn't a safety net at all. It's honestly just a runway for an unstoppable force of nature to build momentum right to the city's doorstep.
So what that distance actually gives them is a terrifyingly fast ticking clock. We're talking about a desperately short 12 to 24 hours of warning before the water actually hits. See, the initial wall of water from a breach bursts out moving at 70 to 100 kilometers per hour. And sure, it'll slow down a bit by the time it reaches Wuhan, but it is absolutely still arriving within a single day.
Which brings us to the core impossible equation of our investigation today. How on earth do you empty a megacity in a single day? How do you physically move 11 million people, clear out hospitals, and evacuate homes when the clock is rapidly ticking down from 24 hours? Let's break down the physical and logistical reality of this looming nightmare. Section 1. The threat, the approaching water. Let's see exactly what kind of hazard we're dealing with here.
So Wuhan is definitely no stranger to floods. They've got levees, massive pumping stations, and diversion channels all built for natural monsoon rains, the kind that peak for maybe a few hours. But a dam break? That is an entirely different beast. We are talking about 39.3 cubic kilometers of water from a full reservoir, creating a suffocating, sustained rise. It wouldn't just be one crashing wave. It would be a massive rise in river levels that drains over days, keeping the water dangerously high and utterly overwhelming those monsoon defenses.
The brutal engineering reality is simply this. There is no magic wall you can build for this scenario. Wuhan's defenses are based on historical flood data, maybe with some extra safety margins built in. But no amount of preparation, literally no city on Earth, is built to withstand the total failure of the world's largest dam upstream.
Moving on to Section 2, the trap, urban geography.
When you zoom in on Wuhan's physical layout, the danger practically multiplies. The city's own geography kind of turns it into a trap. It sits right at the confluence of the Yangtze and Han rivers, which effectively splits the city into 3 distinct districts, Wushang, Hankou, and Hanyang. And tying these massive areas together, just 6 main bridges above ground, and a really extensive subway system below.
Now, in a sudden crisis, those 6 vital bridges instantly transform. They go from being your only lifelines to absolutely terrifying choke points. Any land evacuation route has to cross the rivers. So, if the low-lying areas flood first, or if the bridges get submerged, those 3 districts are instantly cut off. They become isolated islands.
And if we look below ground, the danger is even more immediate. Wuhan boasts an incredibly extensive subway system, but much of it runs right at or near river level. A major flood would immediately inundate these tunnels. It would destroy the electrical systems, trap anyone caught below, and create this massive submerged labyrinth that would take months just to recover.
All right, Section 3, the impossible equation, logistics and psychology. Let's look at the actual math of moving these people. When you map it out, the grim sequence of events proves that safely moving 11 million people in 24 hours is mathematically impossible. Even if every single car, bus, and train somehow mobilized at the exact same second, the capacity just isn't there. Step 2 is the real killer here. The highways leading out of Wuhan would face absolute gridlock within a single hour, and since rail capacity is strictly finite, the end result is a chaotic, extremely partial evacuation. And we really have to pause and acknowledge exactly who gets left behind in that gridlock. Because the people who make it out, they have cars, and they heard the warning early. But the ones stranded? It's millions of people. It's the elderly, patients stuck in hospitals, people without personal vehicles, and inevitably, those who just cannot believe a disaster of this magnitude is actually happening until it's too late.
Now, you might be thinking about their recent pandemic experience, and it does provide this really bizarre kind of preparation. Their emergency infrastructure, things like field hospitals and crisis communication, has been fiercely stress-tested. The population completely understands lockdowns and rationing. But think about the psychological side. The raw collective trauma of telling a city that just survived one civilization-level crisis that a physical wall of water is now coming to wash it all away, that tests human resilience on an entirely unprecedented level.
Which brings us to our final section, a cruel historical irony.
To truly grasp how vulnerable Wuhan is, we have to look backwards. This city has a devastating centuries-old relationship with catastrophic flooding. Back in 1931, Yangtze floods killed an estimated 2 to 4 million people in the broader region. In 1954, 33,000 died as the city was literally submerged for 100 days. And here's the kicker. The Three Gorges Dam was built primarily to protect Wuhan and prevent a repeat of those exact tragedies.
Looking neutrally at the history, the devastation of those 1931 floods had massive socio-political impacts. The sheer scale of the disaster and the suffering of millions directly fueled the political instability of the era. Historians widely note that this instability helped enable the communist revolution in the region.
And that brings us to this absolutely staggering paradox. If the Three Gorges Dam were to fail, the very structure purposefully engineered to protect this specific city from flooding would become the ultimate instrument of its destruction. It would literally trigger a 21st century repeat of the disaster it was specifically built to solve.
It's a cruelty of almost mythological proportions. So, I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Does knowing Wuhan's deep, traumatic history of flooding, right alongside their recent pandemic trauma, make this lingering structural vulnerability even more tragic? Think about that for a minute, and make sure you join us for our next explainer as we continue our tense journey down the Yangtze, following the water's path to the end of the river. See you then.